One of the most beloved medieval sports comedies of the early 2000s almost looked completely different behind the scenes. Different actors nearly took the lead roles. A stunt accident ended up staying in the finished film, and one of Hollywood's biggest advertising scandals was tied directly to its marketing campaign. Today, we're digging into 20 fascinating facts about A Knight's Tale, covering everything from casting drama and on-set mishaps to hidden historical references and behind-the-scenes decisions that shaped this unlikely cult classic. Starting at number 20, a sequel almost happened. Writer-director Brian Helgeland developed a follow-up concept that would have taken William Thatcher's story in a completely different direction, moving away from jousting tournaments and into pirate territory. The plan involved Count Edhemer returning as the villain, kidnapping Jocelyn, and forcing William and his friends into a rescue mission that stretched toward Constantinople, complete with a prisoner bearing a treasure map tattooed on his back. Despite Helgeland's enthusiasm, Sony passed on the project after weighing the original film's box office numbers, and a later attempt to revive the idea at Netflix also fell through, leaving one of cinema's strangest hypothetical sequels stuck in permanent development. At number 19, William's fake noble identity carries more historical weight than most viewers realize. The name Ulrich von Liechtenstein, which William adopts to compete in tournaments reserved for nobility, actually belonged to a real 13th-century Austrian knight and poet known for his flair for the dramatic. The real Ulrich famously toured Europe dressed as the goddess Venus, while challenging other knights to justs, treating tournaments as theatrical performances rather than simple combat. While the film doesn't attempt to retell his actual life story, it borrows his name and showman spirit to add an unexpected layer of authenticity to its fictional hero. Number 18 involves a casting decision that seems unthinkable now. Before Heath Ledger became William Thatcher, Sony Pictures had their eye on Paul Walker, viewing him as a commercially safe choice with rising star power. Director Brian Helgeland disagreed, feeling Walker's energy read as too contemporary for the romantic, adventurous tone he wanted, even within a film that deliberately blended medieval settings with modern style. Helgeland instead pushed for Ledger, who at the time was best known for 10 Things I Hate About You and represented a considerably bigger risk. That gamble paid off, giving the film the warmth and charisma that helped define its lasting appeal. At number 17, Ledger's casting came together in an unusually casual way. During a layover in Los Angeles while flying home to Australia after filming The Patriot, Ledger crossed paths with Helgeland, who was still searching for his lead. When Helgeland asked about a long tube Ledger was carrying, Ledger pulled out a didgeridoo and began playing it right there in a restaurant, drawing the attention of nearby travelers. That spontaneous, unguarded moment reportedly stuck with Helgeland and helped convince him he'd found the right actor, even though it wasn't a formal audition at all. Number 16 centers on Paul Bettany's fight to play Geoffrey Chaucer. Sony reportedly leaned toward Hugh Grant for the role, viewing him as an established, bankable comedic name. Helgeland pushed back hard, convinced Bettany had the eccentric, unpredictable energy the character needed, and the disagreement escalated to the point where Helgeland reportedly threatened to walk away from the project entirely if Bettany wasn't cast. The studio eventually relented, and Bettany's performance became one of the film's most memorable elements, helping launch his career in the process. At number 15, convincing the studio took more than just Helgeland's insistence. Sony executives remained unconvinced that Bettany could deliver the comedic energy Chaucer required. So Helgeland filmed an informal screen test at his own home using a basic camera, capturing Bettany dramatically overacting a scene involving a thorn stuck in his foot. The unpolished footage reportedly had the room laughing when Helgeland showed it to executives the next day, and that homemade tape ended up securing Bettany the role. Number 14 reveals another actor who was briefly in consideration for Chaucer. Before Bettany entered the picture, Sony reportedly looked at comedian Drew Carey, who was riding high on the popularity of The Drew Carey Show, and whose line is it anyway? Helgeland worried that Carey's strong association with modern television would pull audiences out of the film's medieval setting, even given its playful blend of historical and contemporary elements. He continued pushing for a lesser-known performer, a decision that ultimately led the studio back toward Bettany. At number 13, a future James Bond actor nearly joined the cast. Daniel Craig auditioned for the role of Count Edheimer years before becoming a global star, and Helgeland later said Craig's audition showed real intensity and authority. However, a practical problem emerged. Craig and Ledger shared similar light-colored hair and features, raising concerns that audiences might struggle to distinguish hero from villain on screen. The role ultimately went to Rufus Sewell instead, whose darker look created a clearer visual contrast and whose cold, control performance gave Edheimer a distinct sense of menace. Number 12 follows Sewell's unusual road to that role. Years before the film was cast, Sewell had auditioned for Helgeland on an entirely different project, originally reading for a heroic role before asking to try the villain part as well, even though that role had reportedly already been filled. His performance stuck with Helgeland long after the audition ended, and when casting began for A Knight's Tale, Helgeland remembered him and reached out directly, turning an earlier missed opportunity into one of the more distinctive performances of Sewell's career. At number 11, one of the film's funniest crowd moments almost fell completely flat. While filming tournament scenes in the Czech Republic, the production relied on local extras who largely didn't speak English, which became a problem during Chaucer's big introductory speech. Instead of cheering on cue, the crowd stood in confused silence until Mark Addy, playing Roland, spontaneously let out a loud cheer that gave the extras a clear signal to follow. Rather than reshoot the moment, the filmmakers kept the take, and the production began using cue cards afterward to guide crowd reactions more reliably. Number 10 uncovers a subtle visual joke hidden in plain sight. When Kate the blacksmith upgrades William's armor, she stamps it with a personal maker's mark that closely resembles two upside-down Nike swooshes placed together, an intentional bit of modern branding tucked into a medieval setting. The reference fit naturally into a film already built around rock music soundtracks and anachronistic touches, and when the filmmakers needed permission to use the design, Nike reportedly found the joke amusing enough to approve it, an irony not lost on anyone once people noticed Nike's co-founder happened to be named Phil Knight. At number 9, much of the cast's on-screen chemistry came from genuine friendship built off-camera. Several actors arrived in Prague ahead of schedule, and what was meant to be preparation time quickly turned into extended nights exploring the city together. Beyond some horseback riding and combat training, the group spent much of their early time simply bonding over Prague's nightlife, and those real friendships translated directly into the natural camaraderie audiences see between William, Roland, and Chaucer throughout the film. Number 8 highlights a risky creative choice born from budget pressure. The emotional church scene between William and Jocelyn was shot on an expensive set reportedly costing over $100,000 per day to operate, and with the production already behind schedule, Helgeland made the unusual decision to film the entire conversation in a single continuous take rather than shooting multiple angles for editing flexibility. Heath Ledger and Shannon Sossamon rehearsed extensively to make the uninterrupted take work, and the resulting scene became one of the film's more elegant moments, born directly out of necessity. At number 7, the jousting sequences owe a surprising debt to uncooked spaghetti. Early on, the filmmakers considered computer effect for the shattering lances, but early 2000 CGI couldn't convincingly replicate the chaotic burst of splintering wood. The production switched to lightweight balsa wood lances that would break safely on impact, then packed dry spaghetti inside the hollow sections so it would snap and scatter through the air like realistic wooden splinters when the lance is shattered, giving the joust sequences their distinctive physical energy. Number 6 involves a real accident that made it into the finished film. During a high-speed jousting sequence, a stunt rider was struck in the head by part of a lance, prompting filming to stop immediately while the crew confirmed he wasn't seriously injured. Once the footage was reviewed, the filmmakers realized the impact looked strikingly authentic, and since the rider recovered without serious harm, they chose to keep the moment in the final cut, reinforcing the production's overall preference for practical stunts. At number 5, finding performers who could actually joust proved harder than expected. Professional jousting is an extremely rare skill, so the production turned to riders from Renaissance fairs and historical reenactment groups rather than traditional stunt actors. These specialists brought genuine expertise in handling horses and lances at speed, and because qualified riders were so limited, at least one performer ended up playing multiple different nights throughout the film simply by changing armor and colors. Number 4 shifts away from production trivia toward a quieter, more personal story. While filming in Prague, castmate Alan Tudyk received news that a close friend had died unexpectedly, and being far from home made the loss especially difficult. Heath Ledger and co-star Heather Graham reportedly spent time supporting him during that period, simply checking in and making sure he wasn't alone, a private act of kindness that Tudyk later said meant a great deal, and that reflects how Ledger was often remembered by those who worked with him. At number 3, the film's marketing became tied to one of Hollywood's most notorious advertising scandals. In the early 2000s, Sony Pictures' marketing division fabricated a critic named David Manning, attributing glowing quotes to him across promotional materials for several films, including A Knight's Tale. The deception worked for a time, since audiences assumed the praise came from a real reviewer, until journalists discovered Manning didn't exist at all. The revelation triggered significant media backlash and legal consequences for the studio, and it remains one of the more infamous examples of deceptive film marketing on record. Number 2 follows Shannon Sossamon's unconventional path to playing Jocelyn. Rather than coming up through traditional auditions, Sossamon was discovered at a Los Angeles birthday party by a casting director who noticed her striking presence. At the time, she was working as a model and DJ with very little formal acting experience, but she impressed the filmmakers enough during auditions to beat out more established actresses for the role, giving her an unlikely breakout opposite Heath Ledger in a major studio release. Finally, at number 1, the film quietly launched the career of a future Oscar nominee that almost nobody noticed at the time. French actress Bernice Bejo appeared in a small supporting role as Christiana, one of Jocelyn's attendants, marking her American debut while she was still largely unknown outside France. Years later, her performance in the 2011 silent film The Artist earned widespread acclaim and an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress, turning her brief early appearance in A Knight's Tale into a small but notable footnote in the career of one of international cinema's most respected actresses. From risky casting battles and studio disagreements to on-set accidents, hidden jokes, and a pirate sequel that never set sail, A Knight's Tale had a far more chaotic and unpredictable journey to the screen than most fans ever realized, which makes its status